Thanksgiving is a unique American holiday. And what comes to mind when you think of Thanksgiving? We think of family and friends gathered around the table having a good meal and giving thanks for all of our blessings. And watching sports on TV. Football, basketball. Ah yes, a favorite American pastime. And of course, those images which were given to us in elementary school of Indians and Pilgrims celebrating the harvest. Etymology, the history of a linguistic form shown by tracing its development since its earliest recorded occurrence in the language where it is found.
Today, November 23rd, is Thanksgiving, and because we've all heard the happy Pilgrim and Indian story, I thought it would be appropriate to share a less heard tale, the true story of Thanksgiving. Most Americans today believe that Thanksgiving celebrates a harvest, but the real legacy of the Pilgrim Fathers includes treachery and terror as well. In 1637, near present-day Groton, Connecticut, over 700 men, women, and children of the Pequot tribe had gathered for their annual Green Corn Festival, which is our Thanksgiving celebration. In the pre-dawn hours, the sleeping Indians were surrounded by English and Dutch mercenaries who shot or clubbed them to death, while the terrified women and children who huddled inside the longhouse were burned alive. The next day, the governor of the Massachusetts Bay Colony declared a day of Thanksgiving because 700 unarmed men, women, and children had been murdered. Even the friendly Wampanoag did not escape the madness. The killings became more and more frenzied, with days of Thanksgiving feasts being held after each successful massacre. George Washington finally suggested that only one day of Thanksgiving per year be set aside, and Abraham Lincoln later declared Thanksgiving Day to be a legal national holiday during the Civil War.
The Puritans who conducted this war profited greatly from its outcome. They seized land, they became rich through wampum and wampum tribute, they sold Pequot captives. Many of them became wealthy men as a result of this conquest.
I estimate there was about 4,000 Pequots before the war. About 1,500 were killed or captured during the war. 300 or 400 or 600 at Mystic, and then several hundred during the ensuing 2 or 3 months. The majority of the tribe survived. Many of them sought safety with friends and allies at Quinnipiac, Long Island, Connecticut, Narragansett, Mohegans, some various Nipmuc groups, and a very few, perhaps no more than a dozen, were actually sold into slavery in the Caribbean. And I suspect that several hundred Pequots eventually ended up in Massachusetts Bay, Plymouth, and Connecticut colony as virtual slaves.
Captain John Mason was the soldier who led the attack on the Pequot Indians. John Mason was born in England in 1600. After serving in the Netherlands under Sir Thomas Fairfax, he came to Dorchester, Massachusetts in 1630. In 1637, Mason was commissioned by the General Court of Connecticut to lead the attack on the Pequot Indians.
Captain John Mason was given numerous land grants and was awarded the prestigious rank of Major for his military success in the Pequot War.
Up until about 10-15 years ago, Mason was largely regarded as being a hero. I think what the Pequots have succeeded in doing is kind of not necessarily rewriting history, but challenging our perception of it. And I think that's a very valuable thing. I think too often we tend to accept the picture that's come down to us as being the truth.
To remember John Mason as just an Indian killer, I think does disservice to what he did for the rest of his life as guardian of the Mohegan tribe.
In his own words, John Mason formally stated in a letter to the General Court I shall not climb after applause, nor do I much fear a censure. I desire that my name be sparingly mentioned. My principal aim is that God may have his due praise. Signed, your unworthy servant, John Mason. I feel that this speaks volumes about the character of John Mason. And I'm very proud to be a descendant of this exemplary leader.
John Mason enjoyed going into battle. He enjoyed killing people. He enjoyed the blood and the guts. To have the settlers 200 years later or so erect a statue to a pig like John Mason would be unbelievable that they could do that.
But the thing that was dangerous about John Mason to me was that the fire that he had in his heart was the more dangerous than the fire he had in his hand. Because the fire he had in his heart was the fire of hatred that was fueled by bigotry, greed, and intolerance. And unfortunately, that fire still burns today.